Revolution Radio proudly presents live from Phoenix, Arizona, the Truth Denied Talk Radio with host Roxy Lopez. Join us here for topics you won't hear about on mainstream news, such as chemtrails, GMOs, nutrition, and conspiracy facts regarding your personal sovereignty. Humanity is 7 billion strong. We are the majority. And now, live from the Valley of the Sun, your host, Roxy Lopez.
And how you doing, everybody? It's the 24th of May, Friday. Hope you're all kicking back tonight. Thanks for joining us on the event page. I see there, I don't know, about 450 of you. And then hello, everybody in the chat room. Nice to have you this evening. Don't forget, if you've got questions for my guest this evening, you know the drill. Just go ahead and post them, and my producer will pick up those questions, and we'll try to get all of them asked for you. We generally do. And then, of course, I think in the second hour, let's open up the phone lines, and I'll give you the number then. I'll give it to you now in case you want to write it down. Anybody listening who's not in the chat room, the number is, get your pen out, 347-474-7228. And extension 821, that will ring it to my show. And we'll be happy in the second hour to take some of your phone calls. I know that when we open up the phone lines, a lot of you have a lot of questions. So I want to give the listeners who are not in chat rooms an opportunity to also ask your questions. And I just want to thank you all again for making the show as popular as it is and for spreading the word about the show. The program seems to be moving upwards, weekly, monthly in listenership. So I want to thank you very much. I want to thank Revolution Radio. And by the way, if anybody is listening and you're listening through thetruthDenied.com, while you're there, you can go ahead as usual and see all of the links to my guest, my current guest tonight, who is Wilbur Allen. And anything that you need, go ahead and write us at info@thetruthDenied.com. That's info@thetruthDenied.com. And we're happy to forward your questions, long after the show, or anything if you want to be in touch with any of the guests, including my guest this evening. I'm looking forward to the interview that tonight. He and I have been speaking in the last month at length, some of the imagery that he has now received. And for any of you who do not know who Wilbur Allen is, he's a photographer, and he is a former White House Air Force One engineer for ABC News, and he also worked with the presidents Ronald Reagan, George Bush, Bill Clinton, currently under contract photographer for National Geographic magazine. He's got so many other stories to tell and so many other engagements as well that he has been on recently. And if any of you listened to, a couple of months ago, you heard some of that that he was up to. Without any further ado, I'd like to welcome to the show Wilbur Allen. Wilbur, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me back, Roxy.
Oh, you're so welcome. When I get on the phone with you, when you and I get on the phone and start chatting about some of the stuff, and you generally send me, some of the images that you're looking at and some of the video. That last time, you really blew my mind. You always do, but the last time that you and I spoke, and you sent some of the clips. Oh my goodness. The one with, keep in mind, if you can envision this, listeners, in the middle of the desert. Wilbur's out in the middle of the desert, pitch black. He's got cameras set up on tripods, etc. And imagine this, that out of nowhere in the dark sky, this image just appears, just comes right out of dark space. And what's really bizarre about that footage, Wilbur, is that on top of it, you can see light as though the sun were rising, but right over you, not from the horizon. And this light comes over you and the camera and then goes behind you, and it lights up the trees and everything that's all around you. And, of course, it passes, but yet there's no ship. There's nothing to see. There's not a ship with lights on it shining down. It is the most bizarre UFO blip, if you will, that one of the most bizarre I've ever seen. So can we start with that one? I mean, can we start with talking about what exactly happened that night? What were you doing out there?
That was the most bizarre incident I've ever experienced in most of. Well, I'll take that back. It was equally as bizarre as the events that I experienced in Area 51, where this object communicated with me telepathically. Well, in this case, it was the same thing. I just finished climbing a mountain for the BBC, and we're working on a UFO special. And they had me lug all this gear up the side of a mountain. I've got a tripod, I've got 60 pounds worth of camera gear strapped to my back, and I'm going up the side of the mountain. So by the time I get to the mountaintop, needless to say, I was physically destroyed because I had never had that much of a workout in the sense of working myself up the side of a mountain with that much equipment just to get a shot. But we got to the top of the mountain, and I was unable to open up my camera bag because my body was physically destroyed. So we scrapped the shoot and went back down the mountain, and they took me back to the hotel where I went to bed. And I went to bed in pain. But at about 3 o'clock in the morning, I woke up and I was in no pain anymore, and something was instructing me to take my camera outside and set it up. So I went outside and set up my camera within 5 minutes of getting this message. And do you know, when I hit that start button, within 2 minutes of hitting start, this object came out of what Edgar Mitchell was talking about as a dimensional portal, which these extraterrestrials are using to come from wherever they are into our airspace. And it showed whenever this event take place. But what was interesting about it was it's a frame-by-frame sample of an object that comes, I would say, from a wormhole, and you can see it materialize and manifest into the video and fly through the video. It materialized, flew through, comes back 2 hours later and does this forward scan technology stuff, which it was scanning treetops. I saw this bright flash in my room, and I thought it was people outside taking pictures with a flash camera, but I'd never seen a flash that bright before. But as I looked into it further, whatever this object was, as it vanished, you could see clearly it's starting to dematerialize in a frame-by-frame analysis of this object as it warped out into wherever it went when it vanished. So I've never seen anything like that before, with the exception of that event at Area 51, which showed the same thing.
Right. And you did capture it. I mean, and keep in mind, people, when Wilbur was out in Area 51, you did about 60,000 photos in 2 days, right?
I did 60,000 photographs in 2 days.
So yeah, and keep in mind, if any of you who want to take a look at some of what we're talking about, go ahead and go to ufo.dc.com. That's UFODC.com. Sorry about that. I've got a bad note here to myself. Sorry about that. Yeah, I thought that was really weird. I don't remember hearing the dot. UFODC.com. Anyway, I've got to copy and paste on something else, and somehow a dot got in there. But that's not unusual. I'm having a lot of weird stuff going on with the computer these days. So UFODC.com, if you want to take a look at some of the stuff, we're going to go over a few of the photos on your website, Wilbur, later on in the show, just so that people have an understanding of what you do. Now, when you take photos, what is the delay in it? It's like something like 1/8,000th of a second or something?
Well, it depends on the time of day that I do these photographs. During the day, I find myself shooting at 1/8,000th of a second shutter speed because things happen so fast that in most cases, like what I demonstrated in the Bradshaw Ranch while we were filming out there, that an object flew by, and it flew by so fast nobody saw it. If you ran the video, you wouldn't even see it in real time. But if you looked at it in a frame-by-frame analysis, there was more activity than met the eye. But the human eye would not see that. So we're dealing with a situation here where these objects can materialize and be directly in front of us, and we won't even see it. But they're there.
You wouldn't even catch it with the naked eye. And you wouldn't, like you said, even with footage, you wouldn't catch it.
You wouldn't catch it. And it was interesting that in all of the cases, what I was able to do, and The camera that I have is a very interesting camera. It shoots video at 30 frames per second, and I can choose whatever shutter speed I like. But in this case, I chose 1/8,000th of a second. So that means I have 30 frames of 1/8,000th of a second in 1 second of video. So I have 30 frames at 1/8,000th of a second. So I looked at each one of those frames, and it would be interesting that I would find one frame that would have anomalies in it. But you wouldn't find those anomalies in any of the other frames in the video. So when you look at it, whatever these objects are, they're moving much faster than meets the eye, and they're moving at a point where even in video, I'm fortunate to capture them in the one frame. But outside of that, that's about all you're going to get, because that event takes place so fast. You're never going to see it, but it does indeed take place.
Wow. And now that you know, because you've gone over so much of your own footage and you're catching certain things. Again, anybody that's at the website at ufodc.com, you can see a little line coming through the frame of a photo. If you're on the site, there's a few pictures like that right at the get-go when you start opening the page. And that photo, if your shutter speed was any more than that, it probably wouldn't have shown up in the photo to begin with, right?
Well, if I had a faster shutter speed, what probably would have happened, I would have been able to see it in multiple frames and see it in action as it approached that point of view from the camera's perspective. But these things are moving so fast that for me to capture it in that one frame, and that's 1/8,000th of a second, and in between a 30th of a second. So it's happening so fast, it's impossible for a human to catch that. But it indicates that these types of events are taking place on a daily basis because my samples show that type of event daily.
Okay, let's go back to the one that I'm very intrigued by, which is the one where the light is suddenly shining on all the treetops, and then it passes by you, and then it's gone, and it's dark again. When you were filming that, when you were shooting that, with your physical eyes, did you also see that light coming through on the top of the trees?
Actually, I set my cameras to fire autonomously because I'm not going to sit there and wait for hours. And generally speaking, there's a saying that, and it's another word, but something happens every second. Stuff happens every second. And if that is indeed the mind, indeed the case, then what I'm able to show with that premise, that every second that there is action, and that's what I was able to program within my camera to photograph during the durations of time that I programmed the camera to photograph. Like in these cases, I was programming 3-hour intervals for each one of the sequences of video that I fired. So within those 3 hours in each one of the videos, the course of events did indeed take place. So we were able to prove without a doubt that stuff does indeed happen. So, but what was interesting about it is that the video showed this object come into Sedona airspace, and it came into Sedona airspace materializing into a solid object. As it left Sedona airspace as a solid object, dematerializing into immaterial state of existence, where it completely vanished in the stream of video. So I got it coming and going. So what it indicates is it shows how these extraterrestrial devices are able to infiltrate our airspace undetected, fly through, do whatever they like, and leave undetected.
That's frightening.
Absolutely. And Sedona has a lot of missing people, and based on what I was able to capture on film there on a nightly basis, it's without a doubt that is probably an extraterrestrial highway, because what I was able to capture on a nightly basis in Sedona were extraterrestrial anomalies.
Now, and let's just back up a little bit and keep in mind, listeners, I've already had the conversation with Wilbur. I've asked him quite a few questions in relationship to this because it really is stunning. I'm really intrigued, like I said. Now, have you ruled out the idea that it's not meteorites or meteors, right?
We ruled that out. It's without a doubt, because see what happens in this video, especially, you see it has a controlled velocity, and meteors don't have a controlled velocity. As it appeared in the first set of video, it came into Sedona airspace slowly, but in the second video, it exited with a much higher rate of velocity. So it showed coming in slow, exiting fast. So we know that meteors don't have a controlled state of velocity when they enter into the atmosphere, and generally speaking, the meteor wouldn't be represented as a linear line, which these samples are.
Right. And then what about the idea of, military exotic weaponry, military technology?
I doubt very seriously that we have technology that enables us to cloak and go in between dimensions as this object did. I doubt very seriously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
we're still in forward flight technology mode, so I doubt very seriously.
What do you think? I mean, an estimation, because you've done so much of this filming and you're used to looking at what you look at, so to speak, and footage and so forth. How fast is this object flying?
Well, as I mentioned in the first video, it came into Sedona airspace moving relatively slowly because based on the samples, I got frame after frame of this object, and it moved with a very slow, methodic velocity associated to it as it moved forward. But as it came back, it was moving much faster and it was much brighter. And I could only guess, just based on the physical sample, that I would say it was probably moving maybe 15, 20 miles an hour initially. And as it left, it was probably hitting 60, 70, 80, maybe 100 miles an hour. Maybe faster. I'm just guessing.
This is crazy because what you described as well, Wilbur, is that it's like popping in and out of dimensionals and in dimensions, I should say. And we would think that's some kind of crazy warp speed, like in Star Wars or something. So
we would think that, but we're talking about higher order technology, and to us, we couldn't possibly fathom any kind of technology like that. And which, by the way, what I photographed in Sedona, I photographed in Area 51. So I know without a doubt that whatever that object is, it also exists in Groom Lake, over Groom Lake in Area 51. So that's where I initially got the samples of it materialized into the world.
Right. And now, I want to bring up some other things that you have colleagues you share information with and so forth and so forth. Quite a few of them. You and I ran down the line of a few of them. We can talk about that if you want to. But when you're showing this evidence to other colleagues, and I'll leave them nameless at the moment, what are the colleagues coming back with as far as what you've captured? When I show my material to my colleagues, and I'm open because I understand that when I present somebody something, it's up to that person to believe it or not. And generally speaking, a lot of people are not apt to believe what they see, especially when they're looking at something that's completely unknown. So in that case, when I submitted my samples, and I use people like Edgar Mitchell. Edgar is a personal friend of mine. He was also one of the few people to stand and step forth on the moon during Apollo 14. When I sent Edgar my footage, Edgar was floored because it was essentially what I think he was experiencing on the moon, and what other astronauts experienced on the moon when they dealt with anomalous objects and events that would just transform themselves in front of them while they were doing their missions. So it is, without a doubt, physical evidence that indicates how these objects are entering into our airspace. And how is that? How are they entering?
I would think, and based on what I'm very limited to know, and we're all based, on the information that we're fed as we are being brought up in this society, But I would say from what I've sampled that they're using what we would consider a Stargate technology, and a Stargate technology isn't used in this case.
Mm-hmm.
Self-generated Stargate.
Like a wormhole or something like this.
But they have that kind of ability to generate it themselves. And, you know, you look at all of these UFO reports, for example, when the UFO swarms flew by the U.S. Capitol building in 1952, it was July 16, 1952, and you look at the reports made, they scrambled F-86 Sabres to these UFOs, and by the time the F-86 got to the U.S. Capitol building, the objects were gone. But when the F-86 went away, they reappeared. They didn't cloak back then. I think what they did was they went inside a wormhole, a portal that opened a door, flew inside the door, and when they saw the coast was clear, they opened the door and came back out. And we're not able to see those dimensions and those wormholes that they're utilizing.
Right. And you know, that is interesting because what you'd also spoken about, I believe, on the last show, or could have been the show before that, but about, you know, the UFOs over D.C., and,
yes.
You know, we had a discussion about this. For those of you who weren't listening to that show, we had a discussion about it that we're not sure that if any of that showed up on satellite. We're not sure if Washington, you know, our capital, even knew that those came and went.
You know, that's what I'm saying. The physical sample, even from 2002 of the green objects that I photographed from Lower Senate Park, showed that whatever it was, generating this wormhole, and you could see this arc in the sky where there's a hole, and you could see this object inside it in the other dimension and outside it where I was taking the pictures from my point of view. And the people that I would show it to, like people like Stephen Hawking, they were completely blown away by the fact that it is clear indication of how these objects are able to come and go at their own discretion. We don't have any kind of technology like that.
So we're not working with them. I mean, this particular craft or whatever it is, technology.
I've got to think there's a possibility we are working with it, because keep in mind, Sedona and Area 51 are connected.
Right.
To a tunnel. So where I was in the Bradshaw Ranch was in theory what it was equivalent to Area 51 in Nevada, but in Arizona. And I'm getting the same images that I got in Area 51 in Sedona. So what does that say? Either that they're the same object based in Area 51 that just happens to go into Sedona's airspace periodically because they are connected, or that they're multiple objects and multiple bases.
Now, you said there's a tunnel between Sedona and Area 51?
Yes, there is.
Underground tunnel?
Underground.
And how do you know about that?
We did a lot of filming there, and our researchers did some investigation, and that there were people that clearly indicated that there is a tunnel. One of them was Reverend Bob Short. He's a minister out there in Sedona, and he knew every bit about the Bradshaw Ranch and what went on there. And that whatever this tunnel is, it is connected to Area 51 in Nevada.
Wow. Are you going to go and try to find that tunnel? I mean, it's probably in the mountain, right?
It's in the mountain, and that it is well guarded by the security personnel that look like to me the same security personnel that guarded Area 51.
That's interesting.
And then, I don't think we will ever have access to that, but I do believe without a doubt that there's an extraterrestrial base.
Hi, welcome back. And if you're just joining the program, I am on the air live with Wilbur Allen. And, Wilbur is a photographer and, of course, a UFO, I guess, researcher at this point. I mean, I guess you're really going down that line nowadays. I mean, it's become a big part of what you do, isn't it?
It started when I was a kid, so it's been a part of my life. I'm just now going forth and showing it as I see it.
Right. And let's do this. I know that the last time you were on, I had a few people who wrote me, they weren't really understanding the type of technology that you're using to photograph any of this stuff. So could we talk about that for a little bit? what you use, the camera, so forth.
No problems. And it all started when I was in 6th grade. My dad bought me a Nikon F2, and I learned photography at a CIA film lab where they showed me how to process film. So I took what I learned at the CIA film lab and applied it to the technology that I use today. But back in the day, I created this film processor, which allowed me to do what was unheard of in those days of photography. Take 400 ASA film, for example, and I'd push 400 ASA film to 12,800 ASA, and I wouldn't get a grain distortion image problem with that at all. My pictures would end up perfect. So this technology I created allowed me to take the film and stretch it to way beyond the manufacturer's specifications. But I also started noticing that I was also picking up anomalies in my photographic samples with the film stretched out at those limits where, in most cases, objects would appear in frames that were not visible to the eye. So with that in mind, and with the way technology changed and I went from analog film to digital, the E4 Nikon, which I'm using now, has 204,800 ISO, which is completely unheard of in terms of photographic capabilities for most cameras, since most cameras these days go to 25,000 ASA. So with that kind of ISO, I have the ability to go out into areas like Sedona and shoot in absolute darkness and be able to see with a bunch of definition what's in front of me that the eye cannot see. And in this case, it photographed this object enter into Sedona airspace from what we will say as in a Stargate. It entered in through a Stargate, and the camera photographed that. So with the advances in technology, we're going to start seeing more improved photographic evidence of the phenomena which people say does not exist, but I can't say it doesn't exist because I'm getting it on a nightly basis, of UFO activity in wherever I go.
Yeah, that's another thing. You talked about these craft, let's just call them that, or these anomalies that you got on film. When you went back to Washington from Sedona and went back to Washington, D.C. from Area 51 as well on your two separate trips, these anomalies or craft or beings followed you.
Started showing up, and they are showing up on a nightly basis as of this day. Night by night. Every night I get the same photograph. How is that possible?
Is anyone else getting this kind of footage that you know of?
I don't know anybody that has this level of technology at this point, because it is a rather exclusive camera, and they didn't make that many of them, but people who do have them are primarily photographic experts to magazine, Newsweek, Time Life, all Nat Geo people using them. But it's not like something that a consumer would go out to buy at Best Buy, because Best Buy doesn't sell it. Mm-hmm. So, with the technology as it is, even with the stuff you can buy at Best Buy, you can actually photograph and document events that would normally be considered impossible. And that's indeed what I'm doing with the camera technology that I have right now.
Mm-hmm. And we have had a few people on the show that are, came across stuff in the skies almost accidentally. They were filming, for instance, one of the gentlemen, Sean Gautreaux in New Orleans. He was filming lightning. And that's how it all started for him a couple of years ago. And the next thing you know, he's got these anomalies now, different than yours, though. He's got, basically triangular craft showing up, but sort of the same thing you're talking about, where they're there and then they're cloaked, then they disappear, and right before your eyes kind of thing, or hover around all day. And that's what I want to know, what you're viewing and what you're capturing, these whatever they are, dimensional craft, let's call it, spacecraft. Is it possible that these really are all over the world all the time? Like, in other words, do I dare ask, are they around us all the time and we just don't know it?
I would say they're around us all the time and they don't know it, but in what I'm doing is a little more abstract because I'm instructed to photograph these things. And it's kind of weird that I would get an impulse, and just like it was in Sedona, I mean, consider my body was physically destroyed when I carried at least 90 pounds worth of gear up the side of the mountain, and I made it to the top of the mountain successfully. But I was not able to do anything else when I got there. So with that in mind, what gave me the strength, which I didn't have when I went to bed, and I didn't have painkillers because my body was aching. I just didn't feel like going to the drugstore because in Sedona everything closed at 10 o'clock. I went to bed in pain. I wake up with no pain, setting up my camera, and within 2 minutes, this object appears. That's kind of bizarre, if you ask me.
Yeah, it is, and I do know what you're talking about. It's something in the subconscious, whatever, or like you say, telepathic that says, "Get up, come on, let's go." At 3 o'clock in the morning. Exactly. Right, exactly. I gotcha. And I've heard others describe a very similar feelings and relationship as well. So, do you think that this might be a relationship that you're having with them in some way that from youth, from what's happened to you, your background? Is this possible? They've been friendlies with you all your life?
Yes, it is. It is indeed what's happened. And now that I've become older and have the means to document the events that I was unable to show as a child, that now indeed that it now becomes a reality for most people who at one time, and keep in mind, you're looking at my samples and they're extraordinary, but as a child, I wasn't able to show the things that I was experiencing, but they were equally the same, but they put me in special ed because of that. So it's interesting that, and with what I have in UFODP.com, I really tried to go back to those people that thought that I was psychologically disturbed for telling other little children about aliens, which I knew absolutely nothing about, but they separated me from that community because they felt that that was negative to the rest of the kids. But here, look what I have.
Right. Well, and why was it never exposed with Apollo 11, like about the luminous green anomalies that they saw? Is there any footage of that?
Yeah, there's plenty of footage of it. In fact, on my website, there are chapters, and you go beyond after Area 51 is where it starts into the film section, and you'll see the U.S. Capitol building there. And the footage that I got from NASA JPL starting from Apollo 7, Apollo 11, Apollo 17, and then from the deployment of X-ray satellites, which was in 1991. I mean, we have physical samples here which clearly indicated NASA knew about these green objects that I encountered in 2002. Mm-hmm. So from 1967 to 1991, during the deployment of the X-ray satellite, NASA had specific physical samples of these green objects in space. But yet they did nothing when I showed the samples of the object parked above the U.S. Capitol building July 16, 2002. Nothing at all.
Now, what did that look like? What does that look like, the one that was in 2002 at the Capitol building?
They looked exactly like what was imaged by Apollo, with the exception the Apollo samples are in space. My samples are maybe 1,000 feet off the ground and 100% stationary above the Capitol building.
That's wow.
Parked. They parked right there.
Right. And no one at the Capitol knows it's up there, parked.
Nope, nobody knew. When I made the samples to the U.S. Capitol Police, and the Detective Division did do an investigation on my footage, and the investigating detective said to me that, Mr. Allen, all your photographs do are substantiate what officers reported on the ground that were on duty. So they confirmed the fact that what I took a picture of was indeed reported by other U.S. Capitol Police officers. But what happens after that? Nothing. Absolutely nothing happens after that. So I have a picture of a UFO that landed on the Capitol building. What happens? Nothing. Does anybody know about it? No. But my pictures clearly show July 16, 2002, a event did indeed take place, and that event included the landing of extraterrestrial objects on the U.S. Capitol building.
Unbelievable. Included in that story also, a few days, I guess it was, after that sighting over the Capitol, I guess a couple had reported seeing a green fireball flying over the Capitol.
That was the icing on the cake, because what they reported seeing was basically what I photographed, and I'd never seen these people before, nor did they know that I took these photographs 4 days earlier, but they just happened to make that report.
Is that something, that really verified it for you, didn't it?
Well, no, what verified it for me was the NASA footage.
Right. The 1969 footage. Okay, because you were looking at the same anomalies. So basically what you're having here is you've got in linear time, you've got this, mid-60s all the way to, we're in 2013 right now. And basically the thread that links this all together is that, of course, with better technology, you and others can now, begin to film the night skies and capture some of this stuff. But what you're saying is that it's all the same stuff. It's all the same, which means, I guess, that it can't be from here, because our stuff isn't the same from the 50s to now, or the 60s to now. You know what I mean? We've evolved, in our technology, so it can't be.
Let's hold that one thought. I was able to get a few photographs taken by Betty Hill. In 1970, I believe she took these photographs. And the photographs Betty Hill took were a match to the objects I photographed at the U.S. Capitol building, were a match to the objects photographed by Apollo 7 and Apollo 11. But when Betty made those photographs public, they told her those were lab errors, mistakes on the film and processing, because they didn't have anything to reference them by. They had no clue what they were talking about, because the people who would look at them, they would see, it's like, here's the problem I have with photographing UFOs and then sending your samples to people who you think are the experts. See, you send your pictures to these people who call themselves the experts. They're clueless what they're looking at. But you're supposed to rely on their opinion as to whether it is a UFO or not. But yet they're clueless what they're looking at. And that people tell me that the photographs I took in 2002 were lens flares.
Yeah, I'm getting tired of that lens flare response, aren't you?
Yeah, it's crap. Or they're telling me it's CGI, but yet they couldn't tell me the CGI program that I used to generate it. But if you know about all these things, you would know CGI is either generated in Maya or 3D Max. But, don't sit there and try to put yourself out there like you're an expert in the field where you have absolutely no knowledge
of what you're looking at.
Exactly. And that's what these people do. It's like talking out their butt.
Do you think it's biased? I mean, is it purposely biased?
I think it's most people speak out of fear, generally speaking, and a lot of people who are stupid will say something stupid and try to make themselves look smart. And because nobody knows if it's the right answer or not, it does make them look smart. But in reality, they're stupid.
That's got to be really aggravating for you as well. And now, how did the 1969 footage of the green anomalies, I guess, on the moon?
No,
they're not on the moon.
No, it's first, let me tell you the course of action here. During Apollo 7 was primarily an orbital mission where they orbited Earth.
Okay.
As they were orbiting Earth, they noticed what they thought was a green meteor, but green meteors don't leave the atmosphere. They enter into the atmosphere. This thing was leaving the atmosphere, and they photographed it. The physical sample that was taken by Apollo 7, when you put the green sphere that they photographed next to the formation of green spheres that I photographed at the U.S. Capitol building, and you looked at them in terms of their overall spectral quality, they were a 100% match. And then the Apollo 11 material, which was 16 millimeter motion picture film. If you look at the 16 millimeter motion picture film, and you put that film in a frame by frame sample next to the photographs that I photographed at the U.S. Capitol building, they're a 100% match. So now we have Apollo 7 as a match. We have Apollo 11 as a match. And then it keeps going on with these other physical samples which NASA JPL has that are a 100% match. It indicates that NASA JPL knows about them, without a doubt.
But so they know about them. They're not talking about it. They're not putting it out there that it is ET, obviously.
Well, we have to look at the other side of the coin here.
Okay.
Those people that were involved in NASA JPL when they were doing the Apollo moon mission and the Mercury moon missions, most of those people are retired or expired. So the flow of information stopped. And a lot of that data back then was not digital. It was primarily analog film. So we're probably the problem here is most of that information is sitting in a box in a warehouse somewhere. And now that we're digital, all that analog stuff, they're not even worried about it. Oh, that's some old stuff. Let's just leave it there in the box. And that's
I would think that it would be absolutely relative, being that it's the only time we ever flew any physical bodies up to the moon or around. Well, you know what I mean? We've got the Go ahead.
It's the flow of information, and the people involved in those missions are retired or expired. It's a flow of information thing. It's people. This is people. NASA is not NASA. NASA is people, scientists that did their jobs during these missions, and they were successful at what they did during these missions. Most of that data they took with them. Most of that data, which was classified, it stayed there. But a lot of it went with them. But the flow of information stopped because it wasn't digital. And it was a person that would know that, like Edgar Mitchell and all these other astronauts that were in space that are now talking. It's those people. But that information that they have, we don't know anything about it because it's not public information right now. It's sitting in a box or it's not classified.
Now, as Edgar Mitchell, or has anyone tried to get that declassified?
Well, even Edgar, from what I understand, went to a few briefings at the Pentagon, and he got to a certain point, and even there, they shut the door on him. They shut the door on the president because they know that this is a reality, and we're so close right now to confirming the fact that we're indeed populated by extraterrestrials for the bases that are here, that they're keeping secret.
So,
and the bases are here. There's a base in Sedona. I know that for a fact.
Okay. So they're actually here. These ETs are here, and they're coming and going. Yeah. They could be sharing some technology. I would imagine if they're parked over at like S4 at Area 51, which there's a lot of substantiated proof about that. I mean, there's a lot of people coming through with blowing that too.
My pictures from Area 51 are a match.
Right.
To the video I took last week in Sedona, a couple of weeks ago in Sedona. It's a match, without a doubt. It's a match.
Same objects. Okay. And I've got a question for you, because you're kind of on the inside sometimes with stuff. Have you ever heard any rumors on the inside about anything that's being, any photographs or footage being taken from the International Space Station?
All of that stuff is classified. What's interesting is the International Space Station is using a D3S Nikon, which is a really advanced camera. And I'm using a D4. It's the newer version of what they're using in space. And if I'm getting this stuff with my D4 on Earth, you can imagine what that D3S is getting in space.
No doubt.
I'm getting it daily, so it's happening. It is without a doubt. We are possibly populated by extraterrestrials as we speak.
Mm-hmm. Now, does that trip you out to know that?
No.
No. Why not?
Because it's been happening so much for me that it's like when these things happen, I look at them like it's my relatives coming by for a vacation visit, you know? Believe me, when I tell you how many times it's happened to me, people thought that I was delusional. And I would tell kids, look, hey, you aliens came by last night. Delusional. But look what I'm getting photographs of on a nightly basis. Am I delusional now?
Yeah, it's pretty clear. It's pretty clear.
Is that delusional?
Anyone who's in the chat room, if you have any questions for Wilbur, let us know, because if you're on UFODC.com and checking this stuff out, if you have any questions about any of the images, just let us know and we'll try to answer those for you. Now, because I have tons of questions. You know, I mean, the first time I even went to your website, I've got tons of questions. And I want to know also, are there any documentaries that you're doing at this point, or going to be doing? You know, I'm going to bring this up because, you know, Dr. Greer, you know, and the movie Sirius, you know, Have you had any conversations with Dr. Greer?
I have had a few conversations with Dr. Greer, and Dr. Greer and I are LinkedIn friends. And, you know, it's interesting. Everybody wants to be the one to say that they have the physical proof. And perhaps he does have the physical proof. But keep in mind, there's a lot of evidence out there. And there are more than one sources of data that need to be looked into, and some of that data is something that you can obtain for yourself if you have the right technology. And that's what I'm doing right now, and I'm obtaining that data on a nightly basis. So without a doubt, my data says to me that extraterrestrial activity takes place constantly.
Mm-hmm. I think there are a lot of people out there, Wilbur, that would actually agree with you. You know, you've got a lot of amateur photographers out there right now, and you know, with the creation of MUFON way back in the day, you know, that basically, you know, started data gathering, and that's questionable today because it was bought out and where'd all the data go. But anyway, I don't want to get into that argument, that drama. But you know, for the idea of collecting data, collecting footage, collecting reports, like Peter Davenport. I don't know if you're familiar with Peter, but
I say it all the time because Peter's what's icing on the cake. If I take a photograph, like, I'll give you a perfect example of how Peter Davenport's website works perfectly for me. The close encounter that I had in Baltimore, Maryland, on August the 3rd in 2008 was witnessed by thousands of people that reported it. And my photograph's time code and my photograph's location are consistent with the reports in Baltimore, Maryland, of the teardrop and the orange spheres that landed on August the 3rd, 2008. So, you know, with the physical samples that were reported there, it was the icing on the cake that indicated to me that the event was indeed authentic. But then I got a photographer in Mount Vernon, New York, who had the same encounter 30 days earlier than mine, sharing his data with me, and the objects he photographed were exactly the same as mine. So people are getting the same things. How do multiple people take multiple photographs that look exactly the same, and how do you dismiss that? In terms of physical evidence, you can't.
Correct. And, you know, that's the other side of this coin. For instance, I know that you're familiar with Stephen. Thanks for joining us this evening. My guest tonight is Wilbur Allen from UFODC.com. And we were just talking about, Wilbur, the idea, like, in other words, I think the point I'm trying to make is you've got the Stephen Greers, the Hawkings, you've got the astronauts, you've got yourself out there, and of course, you know, the Disclosure Project, and you've got the, you know, again, Stephen Bassett, who was, you know, on the We the People website, trying to get petitions signed. The latest that I've heard from the citizen hearing on disclosure is, you know, $600,000 provided by a film production deal to get 40 witnesses, which they did from 10 countries, to the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. to testify for 30 hours over a 5-day period. And basically they want to to do this to prompt the U.S. Congress to hold its first hearings on the subject, meaning UFO disclosure, since 1968. So with all of this going on, your evidence as well, that you have the footage, you have the undeniable footage as well. Why, for instance, have you ever sent your footage to anyone in the White House?
I indeed did share my data with the White House, and it's unfortunate that it is the administration's opinion that there's no physical evidence to substantiate that the United States or Washington, D.C. is being visited by extraterrestrials.
So basically, you just get shut down, anybody that's doing any of this type of work. And I have to say there was something a bit sinister and strange about the worldwide petition that was put out onto the Washington, D.C. website, We the People's website, that needed, I think in the first round, don't quote me, but somewhere between 5,000 and 20,000 signatures. And it was out there for about a month, and it was worldwide, that people could sign it worldwide, and they claimed that they couldn't even get, the 5,000 signatures. That was either the first round or the second round. And right away I said to myself, you've got to be kidding, because the interest level of ETs, UFOs, interdimensional craft, you name it, we want explanations. We, the people of the planet, they've got to be more than 5,000 people on the planet. What do you think happened with that? What happened? Why are these petitions not getting the attention that they need, and the signatures? There should be millions of people signed on to this.
Back this up just a little bit. I'm showing you on my website photographs that I get on a nightly basis of an object. Nightly. I live 7 blocks from the White House. Now, what does that say? If I'm getting it, I know they got to be getting it. They got to know it exists. Everything's all going the same direction towards the White House.
Yeah, and again, UFO DC, if you want to go on there, people, and take a look at some of this stuff, we're not talking about photographs that were taken 40 years ago. We're talking about, some of these were just recent, very recent, like end of April.
A couple of days ago?
Right, a couple of days ago. And I have my favorites on here, by the way. I did upload them last time to the last video that we did with you, because they're just astounding. Now, you're making such a clear point to the public that you're 7 blocks from the White House filming this stuff, and you can't get anybody over there to listen to you.
Yes. That is indeed the case.
So they must know. I just can't believe that they don't know. I cannot buy this.
Well,
that they are unaware.
They are completely unaware.
Either they're unaware or this is just part of the whole secrecy, you see. I mean, it's got to be one or the other, Wilbur. And I have a very difficult time believing that the White House, with all its security and Homeland Security and NASA and satellites that surround it, and, for anything that infiltrates the airspace anywhere in the vicinity of the White House, I have a hard time believing that they are not aware of these anomalies.
Well, consider what I got in Sedona just happened to appear out of nowhere. If that is indeed the case, there's no possible way we could know if they are coming and going at any given point.
You described something that really was chilling, actually. It was the first time you were in Sedona. It was probably March. When you were filming out there, and you talked about getting a puncture wound.
Yes.
Okay, and then it took a while to heal as well. Can you please tell us that story again?
Well, I was filming for my big redneck vacation, which I was the expedition team leader both in Area 51 and in Sedona. And it was kind of weird because, this is like an entertainment comedy show. And they're all having fun and laughing and giggling and not taking pictures of the sky, but we're taking pictures of each other because it's a TV show. But what I'm getting pictures of in the sky was a close encounter. We were all in the middle of a close encounter. Not one person knows about it. So that was interesting to say, without a doubt. And then to go out in the desert while filming for my big redneck vacation and to get a message from something in the sky telepathically to tell me to vacate, that was even more abstract, because when I got back to the van, the people that were in the van were wondering what happened to my personality. I was no longer bubbly and cheerful when I got back. I was spooked, and I was ready to go because it told me to leave. So whatever that object was that told me to leave is now here following me. It followed me from Area 51 to Sedona, from Sedona to Shreveport, from Shreveport to D.C. And I got pictures of the same thing everywhere I go.
And listen, the people that you also, when you were on the redneck vacation crew, you also, and it's on the poster that we did advertise for you, and it's on the website, on the truththenide.com's website. If you guys want to take a look at this picture, or actually it's on your website too.
Yeah, those were not redneck vacation people. That crew, that's the BBC stuff that I did. That's on your website.
That's Mike Barra from Ancient Aliens, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And
that's a completely different production there, but Big Redneck Vacation was to start it all.
Right. Gotcha. Okay, so this is a different production crew. I just wanted the audience to realize who these people in the picture are with you, that they are also, in the world of the whole disclosure, wanting this to come forward. You know what I mean? So it's not like they're just dumbbells running around. You know what I mean? Nobody that doesn't know and haven't studied this stuff. So you have these other individuals that are with you, that these individuals in this photo, and the photo's also on your website, ufodc.com. So if anybody's already on there, just scroll up and you'll see the advertisement, you'll see the photo. Who else is in the photos here?
Daryl Sims.
Mm-hmm.
And you put me on the spot here because I'm bad with people's names and I can't even tell you when my mother's
Oh my God, that's okay. Don't worry.
But Daryl Sims.
Who's the guy in the hat and the glasses on the right?
Steve from England, which I forgot his last name. Daryl Sims is the big guy with the cowboy hat.
Got it. Mike Bosch is next to him on the left. And then who's the gal?
She'll be pissed if I can't remember her name.
We're going to get in trouble now, huh, Wilbur? You'll never come on my show again.
Yeah, you just put me on the spot there. It's Maureen.
Well, what does she do? What does Maureen do? Hi, Maureen. What does she do?
Maureen is a UFO expert based out of Phoenix.
Okay.
She has she's in the field also, a very profound person with some very interesting physical samples. But she was instrumental because she knew all the people like at the film lab that did the analysis of my footage, and they did have my footage analyzed. And it's interesting when all of these people, they were expecting to see some amateur stuff. They were expecting to see some airplane that one person would probably misidentify as a UFO or a bird or whatever. But from what I was described happened in that film lab when they looked at my footage, it was as if their mouths hit the ground. And they were all dumbfounded by the fact that here's physical samples of what they had claimed was going on in Sedona, but indeed now on film in high definition. So they were able to blow it up on a massive screen and see this event as it transpired, which, by the way, the object that I photographed that came out of the sky was also imaged in Area 51 a month before I had that encounter.
Mm-hmm.
So it followed me, or it's the same object, but in a different perspective. It followed me, essentially, because I'm getting it everywhere I go.
And that's got to be really spooky, wherever you go, it goes. It's interesting, though, because I have spoken to other ufologists in the past. I'm not going to get into their names, who have been doing research for 25 plus years and filming and so forth. They tend to say the same thing. Once they start spotting these things, everywhere they go, these things show up. And that happened with UFO, what is it, UFO... Who was UFO Chasers? Was it UFO Chasers? No. Which one was the one with? Anyway, it doesn't matter. But it did happen with that crew as well. If anyone wants to help me out with that, it was before UFO Chasers with Bill and all those guys, and they had the same thing happen. They hooked up with a UFO guy by the name of Jeff Willis out here in Phoenix, and they got to the mountain, Superstition Mountain, I believe it was, and they weren't there. They weren't there 5 minutes setting up cameras when these things showed up, and they were like, "You're not kidding." So it is quite interesting if it becomes, like you said, all of your life this has been surrounding you. There is a question from Thunderbird. Wilbur accepts an ED presence. Does he think that they're in charge of everything?
That is a very good question, and it is a possibility because, everything is manipulated, and from what I see, based on what I'm able to get in terms of physical evidence, and then to listen to what I'm being told by the government, then indeed that is the case.
So if they're in charge, then the government, at some level of the government, somebody knows what's going on, because I find it really fascinating as well, your experience out at Area 51 with all of the, remember back in the 80s, it was just a rumor, and Area 51 really didn't exist, and of course the government has never admitted, there's been no admission that it exists, and that Groom Lake and all the rest of it even is there.
It doesn't exist.
Okay.
So I'm just telling you.
Right, it's not there. Right.
It does. And my sample also says that there's extraterrestrial activity taking place right now above Area 51.
Well, there have been whistleblowers that have come out of it, S4. S4 wasn't revealed right up front, and now there have been whistleblowers. I've met a few of them, talked to them in person, and I don't even know what to believe. Honest to God, I don't even know what to believe, because they talk about these tall whites that have been in the side of that mountain for eons and travel interdimensionally to Area 51. They house them. They have a center, a sector. It's private. It's nobody even knows about it. I don't even think the president knows about it. And it goes on and on and on in this S4 area. And it's just the elaborate stories that come out of, with the whistleblowers, when it was just Area 51, and then there was S1 and S2 and S3 and S4, and it's just getting scary to even hear this stuff.
It is indeed an ET base. And, it was even more abstract that, there was a BBC crew that was there along with me, and the BBC crew ventured into the perimeter of the base, and they were met by M16s and a few of the base security people. That was interesting. But, they were more interested on the base, while I focused on the airspace. And, where all the activity wasn't on the base, it was in the airspace.
Mm-hmm.
So, you don't have to go on the base to see that there's alien activity going on there. You can go anywhere outside 20 miles to perimeter and point your camera in the direction of the base and take pictures of the sky and get UFO activity that would suddenly materialize, just like it did in Sedona. Exactly like it did in Sedona, except in Sedona I got it on video.
The the last time I was out there was 1990, and ironically it was President's Day, and there was I didn't plan it that way, and there was a lot of action out there, I'll tell you that much. And I wish I would have had the technology that I have today as well, because I might have been able to get a lot of that on film, because I know how to use the camera, right?
It's bad. People just
it is too bad. But you can. You're absolutely right. You can point and shoot.
Yeah, anything. Just do something to show what's going down. But a lot of people, when they see it, they're amazed, first of all. And when you're amazed, you don't know what to do but sit there and stare. And that's what happens.
Well, let's talk about that too, because there's another element to this, Wilbur. And I can testify to the fact that in 1990, I and two other gentlemen went out there. And this is before. 1990 is way before anyone would ever even believe you. But let me tell you, when we came back from that experience, and everybody in LA was waiting to hear the story, and all we had to do was sit and talk about it with people. People wanted, all our friends wanted to go out there. They were absolutely convinced because we were credible. We don't lie. We don't hoax, things like this. Me and the two people that went out there. We weren't UFO researchers. We were just, people that were like interested in UFOs. But let me tell you something. You've had the same thing happen to you when it comes to the energetic field around you changing. Something changed when we went out to Area 51. When we were out there for about 20, 30 minutes, we could feel something different in the environment. We could feel something shifted. Something wasn't, normal, I should say.
Wasn't human, yes.
Right. And so, and this is long before we ever heard stories about people having those experiences. My goodness, I didn't even know about alien abductions at the time.
Think about this. Hold on. Maybe they do have these experiences, but they interpret them as demonic or evil in terms of the event. Oh, a demon came and visited me. But, the realities are, even the Vatican knows for a fact that what they were describing as demons were aliens.
True. So, but you were even saying that the last experience, the one where the light shone on everything, and it just gave you the heebie-jeebies, whatever. It really did. It amped you out because this was so much more proof than you've ever had and or should I say, ever experienced. But you also mentioned that you felt different as well. The area felt different.
It felt. The first time I was in Sedona, it felt as if something was watching me. And when I say it was creepy, it was absolutely creepy because I found myself in the desert at night and the camera's pointing up taking pictures, but I'm standing in the desert turning in 360 degree circles to see what's going on around me because I couldn't see a thing and I was completely freaked out. But I'm not creeped out easily.
I know you're not. You're just kind of used to all of this stuff.
I'm used to it, but it was creepy. Even more creepy is when all the dogs and coyotes started howling. All it took for me to pick my camera up and run maybe 2 miles in under 8 minutes.
Right. Now, do you think that also that we are some sort of specimen for them? Are they trying to test us for things? Because that's a whole can of worms right there. That's a whole different area. But with your experiences that you've also had, I'm wondering, I have to begin to wonder, taking a sample of your skin as well, just very recently, with the wound that you encountered, the puncture of removal of skin. Are they studying us?
I think that is indeed the case because it happened so quickly. And when you experience something like that, and without a doubt, when you have an accident, you've had an accident because you see a scar or cut, and you had that accident because you could feel it. But imagine going someplace and you're intact, but when you come back, you're not intact. Pieces of you are missing. How does that happen? And when I looked at my finger, it looked like somebody drilled a hole in it. But the hole was underneath the skin, and the skin had a small puncture wound on the top of it.
And that took, you said it took a few weeks to heal, too.
2.5 months.
2.5 months, wow. And that's probably unusual as well. And, I was going to say, your experience in Area 51, for anyone that's listening, I think something has happened as far as the public goes. Like the name Area 51 has come up so many times that I think people, the general public, Wilbur, is becoming immune to to Area 51, the sound of it, the extraterrestrial base, like it almost means nothing. And I'm going to tell you something, people. Not only does it mean something to you, but any of you who live out in Nevada or any of the states, California, Arizona, blah, blah, seriously, you should go out there because doesn't it change your whole reality, Wilbur, when you heard stories, all your life, or you hear shows like ours, but doesn't it change your entire, the gravity of it when you actually go out there and experience it for yourself?
When you have that first encounter, it changes everything considerably. And, you know, a lot of people want to be able to see and have these experiences, and they're not going to ever see or experience these experiences because, you know, it's not necessarily something that's meant for everyone. But at some point, when it does come time for everyone to see that it does exist, they're going to be the first one to push the panic button.
Right, right. Yeah, there's always that consensus that so many people would be in it would shock them. It would put them into shock. And non-acceptance.
In special ed would be the first ones to push the panic button.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so and do you think that because more and more is evolving, in other words, cameras are getting better, more and more people are actually taking those cameras and using them, and social media networks are reporting, oh my God, I just saw a UFO, or I just took a picture of this, and putting it on social media networks around the world. Do you think that this is part of the education of the world so that they won't be in shock, A, and B, who's going to disclose this? Is it going to be the governments of the world, or is it going to be the people?
It can't stop it because there's too much of it. Someone asked me, and they were concerned about my well-being for talking about an alien landing at the U.S. Capitol building. You know, that was 12 years ago, and maybe one person talked to me about it. So do you think there should be concern about people being in fear that somebody, a man in black, is to come visit them and tell them to shut up and make their family disappear? I think that's all hype and propaganda. It's a fear factor thing. They're trying to make people to be quiet, but the realities are it's impossible now because everyone has the ability to get these kinds of photographs.
I would suggest that people do, and you know, like we had mentioned earlier with the UFO reporting site that Peter Davenport has. I mean, you know, I met and knew Peter back in Seattle, Wilbur, way back in the day, where he was just trying to put the, you know, nuts and bolts together to even just start a hotline for people to call in just Washington State. And I remember he was, you know, just giving out his own private phone number for anyone who might have a reporting. And look at where that's come from. That was 95 to now. And you look at what he has set up. You look at what the calls that are coming around the clock 24/7 from all over the world, which substantiates what you are saying and what others are reporting and what others are filming, including yourself, that this is going on, meaning these craft lying around, whatever they are, interdimensional, whatever they are, using portals, what have you, it's going on 24/7. So, I mean, it's proof. It's proof that it's going on 24/7. As you said, you leave Area 51, you go back home, there they are. You take, you know, some footage of it. You go to do the footage in Sedona. You find it there as well. And then, of course, you have some amazing encounters in Sedona.
Everywhere I went, it happened. Everywhere I went, it happened. Everywhere I went.
Unreal. And what you were saying was similar from Sedona and Area 51. Did Sedona also have the Whack-In Hut guys in the Humvees and SUVs?
They've got the exact same security protocols that they have in Area 51 there. Exact same. So it's got to be U.S. government. It's U.S. government property.
That part of it is. Well, and it's very interesting too, because how this is all buried. You know, they're you know, between the location where you were at, isn't it interesting? It's federal land.
Yes.
Parts of that is all federal land, just like Area 51. And then, of course, there's really no proof that Area 51 is out there until you go out there and then you can see it. Of course, there's a couple of satellite images, and those are just the images that they want you to see, because all of the other images that were on satellite at Area 51, the Terra satellite images, they were scrapped. They were all scrapped on the servers, and so people couldn't see it all over again. And now they have, you know, something up there, or USGS, I guess. has something up there. But as far as, the existence of it, again, it's still denied. Now, what about in Sedona? What area of Sedona are you talking about that is, were you approached by the same security there?
We filmed, this is kind of weird. We filmed everywhere in Sedona. But just like in Big Redneck Vacation, the action took place just outside the hotel. And that's where I got all my footage, was just outside that hotel. And if
any of you out there have some questions for us, some more questions in the chat room, go ahead and drop them in the chat room if you're there. Or if you want to give us a call, come on the air with us at 347-474-7228, and that's extension 821. And I keep hearing in emails from all of you that I rattle that off too quickly. But you know what? If you're on freedomslips.com, I think that number is available for you on there, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, it's 347-474-7228, and that's extension 821. So, Wilbur, you were talking about this idea that this was happening late at night outside of the hotel room, where you would have these encounters, and we've heard that as well. With what about Area 51? I mean, how was that coming down there?
Well,
how were you getting the footage there?
What I dealt with when I first sampled the object. That when I triangulated its trajectory, that it stopped over Bradshaw Ranch. So that one thing we were able to conclude just based on the physical samples from the examination and going back into Sedona. So I know for a fact that what I photographed in 2012, when it came out of the sky and stopped, it stopped over, and it completely stopped over to Bradshaw Ranch.
Now, did you get to speak to anybody at the Bradshaw Ranch? I mean, do they have experiences over there?
Most of the people that I spoke with, and it's interesting, there was a retired CIA agent that showed me a photograph that he took in 2000, I believe it was 2000, and his photograph showed exactly the same object that I photographed October 26, 2012, drop out of warp and stop. It was a 100% match. So there are other people who are getting the same objects. So we're able to match that, and he gave me the physical samples, and I posted that sample also on my website. So you're able to see that. A lot of people want to believe that, it's some kind of a lens flare or something that was photographed in error or time exposure. If it was a time exposure, everything would be an etch, not just one object. So they don't know the realities of the physical sample to physically say something is a lens flare or something due to a long exposure. So I'd rather a person not say anything but sit there and look at it objectively. And for what it is, it shows an object come out of nowhere, stop, and as it's stopping, discharge smaller objects into the air. I believe one of those objects is one of the objects that took the meat out of my finger. So, it's all physical evidence. It's all based on experience from what I was able to see and photograph and experience. It's not like, I took this picture and this just happens to be in the photograph and I didn't see it when it went down. It's not like that. We're talking about multiple samples here.
It's interesting that you're talking about this one craft and then several craft coming out of it. I've actually viewed that for myself down here in southern Arizona, and it really caught me off guard. And it was a big light, and you could see it with the naked eye. I mean, it was it was that obvious. It was a very dark night, Wilbur, but it started to go by, and then all of a sudden it started to drop little guys behind it, and they all stayed, and they all kept going. It wasn't like it wasn't flares, because they all kept traveling. They kept moving in a direction. They didn't just stop. And if those were flares, the flares would have been dumped behind the plane, and the plane would have kept going. And what's really interesting,
I had people try to say that what I photographed were flares. Now think about it. Flare wouldn't just suddenly appear and then fly through, or then fly through and then vanish. It doesn't look.
Well, that's
like
what they
that.
tried to say the Phoenix lights were.
Oh yeah, they tried to
the old flares.
Oh come on, give me a break. I mean,
they tried to say that they were flares, and when people were describing this huge, some people described the craft one of the craft that came down. There was a couple that it's an astounding interview, Wilbur. And this craft that these people were sitting like on the 10th floor of their condominium complex, and they were sitting outside in downtown Phoenix. And this craft, they said, came over them, it was already dark outside, came over them. And when they were looking up, it was such a big craft that they couldn't see the sky anymore.
Yeah.
That's how much it covered. And one of the women said that she felt that it was so close that she could almost touch it with her hand. Yes. And then, of course, they come out with that it was lens flares. But back to that one object dropping the others behind it. What's interesting is, did you notice in any of your escapades here, any of your going all over the place and filming everywhere you're going, have you noticed that there's military around at all?
Well, I wanted to continue with that. While we were filming, we noticed a Black Ops helicopter fly by, and it went behind a mountain and never came back out. And it wasn't, they have commercial helicopters, they have commercial airplanes doing the little tours and stuff that fly around Sedona. This was a Black Ops helicopter, all black, no markings, extremely powerful engine. It looked like it had gun mounts on it. It was Black Ops.
Well, I don't know if you know anything about, think about this. Everyone, think about this. The Phoenix Lights, I would say, in the history of the United States, and if anyone has additional information that if you think I'm wrong, but to me, the Phoenix Lights, with the exception of Roswell now, were beyond the shadow of a doubt of how many people had this on video, how many people took pictures, how many people experienced it, and how long that these objects were out in our skies in Phoenix, Arizona. Just beyond a shadow of a doubt, huge, should have been disclosure material.
Well,
right?
Well, the night that I photographed the green objects at the U.S. Capitol building, in the shot with the green object making the Stargate as it left, was this large V-shaped anomaly. And it was so large that as it came down out of the sky, it disrupted the cloud formation around it. It left this like a cake cutter would cut a piece of cake.
Yes.
Cookie, what do they call those? Cookie shaper thingies. They make cookies with. Oh, I'm sorry, wow, that's a simple word. But cookie cutter, it had that effect as a cookie cutter. It was cutting a hole in its configuration into the clouds. Now, the reason why I mention that is the object that was photographed or witnessed by people in Phoenix during the Phoenix Lights was a match to the configuration to the object that came out of the sky at the U.S. Capitol building. And it was huge, as big as a city, huge.
This is so bizarre because what you're describing is what people described in Phoenix, that they saw. There were different crafts that came through. People, that aren't very well informed about it, think that there was just a giant triangular shaped craft that came through, but there was more to it than that. And some people describe it exactly the way that you're talking about it, Wilbur, that they felt like it covered like the whole city. And that's a very big object. So I've got a question for you. Is that one of ours or is that one of theirs?
No way possible. It's one of theirs. We got nothing like that.
Now you do know that they tracked those. They tracked those lights, those Phoenix lights. Do you know they tracked them back to Area 51?
Yeah.
They followed them back to Area 51. Yeah, there's new evidence that supports that. That's whole highway that it followed that goes right back to Area 51. So with that in mind, and if it's their stuff, again, with this new information, new disclosure, money behind it now with what Bassett is doing with all of these, witnesses now, which was Stephen Greer is doing now. What is up for you? What are you doing? Do you participate in some kind of disclosure program? Are you going to? What's life for you next? What are you up to?
Well, I've got the thing coming out on Discovery Channel, which was filmed with the BBC not so long ago. And in my opinion, I've been doing the disclosure thing since my website's been up. And
right.
Nobody seemed to want to listen until now. And I had to take and do what's called a physical assessment of everything that I've done and to see if I could find other people who witnessed the same things, which I did, which just happened to be NASA Apollo. And now that I've got all the physical evidence, indicates that what I encountered July 16, 2002 at the U.S. Capitol building was indeed an extraterrestrial anomaly. Nobody does a thing. Regardless, the physical samples indicate aliens landed, and I took pictures of the aliens landing, and I made the pictures known to everyone around me here in Washington, D.C. Nothing happened. Not even a person has even talked about the stuff that I have. But they'll talk about July 16, 1952, but they won't talk about the stuff I have.
And that's typical, isn't it? I mean, that's why, I'm always really interested on very current stuff, which is what I like about your stuff, and that it's current. And because I'm so over, showing me something that's 40 years old.
Yeah, they're showing rehashing the same crap, and then they want to be stuck on stupid about it. And then when you show them something real, like taken with a NASA-grade camera, they're going to say, oh, it's a lens flare. Oh, it's something wrong with the camera you've got there. And save me the bull, because I don't want to hear this crap. I experience what I photograph, and I have to see it to focus on it, take the picture of it. So if I took a picture of it, don't tell me that I'm taking a lens flare or some kind of dumb, I don't want to use a word which I'm not going to use on the air, but, it makes me furious that it's stupidity-driven, that most people are making these statements and accusations that are based on invalid materials and invalid pieces of information. They don't have any information to support what they say, but yet they'll say, oh, it's Photoshop or it's CGI or, anything they can imagine that it is farthest from, but yet it is not. In reality, it is an extraterrestrial anomaly.
Now, you've spoken with Bruce Maccabee as well, haven't you?
Bruce is one of my associates, and he does analysis on all of my material.
Mm-hmm. And, for those of you out there who don't know who Dr. Bruce Maccabee is, I mean, that is another really credible source for, going over your work as well. Of course, so is Dr. Edgar Mitchell. But it sounds like that's very interesting to hear, Wilbur, that with all of the comparative analysis that you have done, all of the traveling that you have done, all of the exposure that you have done, footage that you have, and we will also have some footage available for our listening audience and our readers when we do the article. But with all of that, it's almost like you're having the opposite happen to you, whereas people like yourself usually get lots of attention. It's almost like it's the opposite. They're purposely ignoring what you got.
Absolutely, I'm being ignored. And, I have to mention to all listeners out there that what I'm getting here is technologically driven. If it was not for the Nikon camera technology, if it was not for the Avid video technology, if it was not for the Boris FX noise reduction technology, none of this would have been possible. So it's technologically driven. So I have this technology, and the technology combined enables me to get the physical samples, which clearly indicates extraterrestrials visiting our airspace at any given point in time. But even with that physical definition, that physical sample that I have, it is not believable by most of the people because they have never experienced anything even remotely close to what I'm sampling. And in their minds, it's not real because it doesn't conform to the Star Wars starships. It doesn't conform to the spaceship from the day the Earth stood still, 1950s UFO style. It doesn't conform to anything like that. But in reality, these UFOs I'm photographing are real.
Right. And I think you've made a really great point, Wilbur, that most people are really looking for that, that giant ET craft that's physical in all right? And lands on the White House lawn, and that everybody, sees the ETs get out and dressed in robes and shakes their hands and this and that, because that's what Hollywood's done to people. I'm sorry, Hollywood. I love you, Hollywood, but that's what it's done, because this is other dimensional stuff.
Well, yeah,
and we're not seeing it. Oh yeah, full on. And we're not able to see it the way we imagined it would be.
Exactly. But in reality, and I got to give it to Gene Roddenberry, what I experienced as a child and what I saw in Star Trek were almost 100% the same.
Right. Well, and what can I say? As far as any future, like I asked, Wilbur, where are you going to take it? You got to take it to the next level. What's the next level? You got to.
Well, like I said, I have the Discovery Channel thing, and there's Nat Geo, my National Geographic page. National Geographic is showing more interest in my work. And, it's interesting, too, with all of the photographers out there and all the technologies that I'm around at Nat Geo, that there aren't any other photographers getting the same kind of pictures. But I don't think that they're focusing on that type of activity like I am. So I specifically direct my cameras to the skies while people are focusing their cameras on other things. But, the realities are I try to take my material to where it would be immediately recognized by those people who would be benefited by it. And I've assimilated most of the objects that I photographed, and I created a color texture technology, which I use for motion picture special effects and for 3D game development. So, there's spin-off products from the UFOs that I am able to capture, which I'm supposed to assimilate them like we do with anything that crashes in the United States. So I've made technology from the objects that I photograph. I'm trying to make things happen with it, and, I'm just happy to be able to present it and show it to people in a positive and professional manner. And that's what I'm able to do with this technology that I do have currently.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that sounds exciting. It sounds like, you do continue to move forward. Now, anyone who wants to go to the website, Wilbur just updated a couple of things for us for the show. So go to ufodc.com and you'll see the first two images, and I would like you to not the very first one, Wilbur, but under the Washington, D.C., the May 17th, which is just a few days ago, the cylinder anomalies. Now, you shot these in, obviously, Washington, D.C., 7 blocks, I'm going to assume, from the White House.
This is taken from the same point of view. I go out of the room that I'm sitting in right now, and I'll open the hatch, and I'll bolt my camera outside the hatch and take a picture, take 6 hours of pictures, rather, every night, and every night I get the same picture, regardless.
Okay, listen, I don't know what this person's talking about, but maybe you will. We just had somebody else, Hated Patriot is his name, in the chat room, and he says, I said Wilbur should sue for character defamation.
I would agree for some people who have, there are people out there that are seriously trying to trash my work. And you go on Amazon and look at the...
Oh, really?
Totally. If you look at me on Amazon, you think I'm a drug dealer or a hustler or something, But they totally trash me on Amazon, regardless of the fact that the physical stuff that I put up there is 100% accurate. So there's people who are hell-bent to stop the flow of information no matter what.
Yeah, I agree.
Even if it takes a negative word, and the negative word does do a lot of damage. But, regardless, I've got new things happening. I've got new footage. And it continues to get new. And the old stuff is behind me. And even though it's profound, the new stuff makes the old stuff look like kid stuff. So, it's never ending. So what can they say about that? They can't say it was the camera or the film, because I'm not using film anymore. They can't say it's inferior optics, which was an insult, that which was not the case. It's people out there who want to stop the flow of information, and they'll do anything to stop it, even if it's a negative word. And the negative word is very effective.
Well, you know what? I want to say, keep up the good work, because, as far as shills and trolls and all that goes, the public in this day of social media, The public's getting really savvy and starting to recognize that, I get the same thing on just about anything I say these days. I mean, they'll just come out in droves and just call me flat out a liar. You're a liar. You know what I mean? My name's Roxy Lopez. Liar. Whatever I'm saying. And it's totally...
For nothing, because
that's right, for nothing. It's true. But it's and they say that I make it, like they say, I've got one. It's on our YouTube channel, and it's the polar shift of the moon. It's called. And there's like 3/4 of the 3,500 comments on there, by the way, that basically harass me and say that I hoaxed it, and I don't even worry about it, because all it's done for me, Wilbur, is validate what I photographed, and I did not hoax it, and it is not a hoax. You know what I mean? And it's gone extremely viral. Yet there's shills all over it saying it's not real, and that I'm totally, crazy.
Well, I'll notice, like on YouTube, I'll put something up profound, like footage of the object materializing in Sedona's airspace, and I'll get a thumbs down. Now, wait a thumbs down? Thumbs down for what? Other than that it scared you, and you're scared, and you gave it the thumbs down? So, we've got people out there, they're hell-bent on stopping the flow of information. They don't want it to be, and I'm not a religious freak, and I'm not going to say it's demons. I'm not going to say it's Satan.
Right.
I'm not going to say any of that crap, because I don't believe in that. I believe it's extraterrestrial. Anything that comes out of the sky, it didn't come out of the ground. If the devil came out of the ground, why is this thing coming out of the sky? It can't be a demon. So, come on, think about it. It's just not logical. But they want to be hell-bent into making something that they have no information or knowledge of into something that they want it to be. It's demons. It's negative. They're going to take over. It's all a bunch of propaganda, and it's all based and propagated on fear.
Right, no doubt. And at the end of the day, I think, Wilbur, that people like yourself, I appreciate your work. I'm glad that you're out there and continuing to photograph stuff. And, of course, UFODC.com, you all might want to bookmark that site. And there'll be more information.
Big Redneck Vacation. Don't forget that. Big Redneck Vacation. I'm Wilbur, UFO
Vacation. When is that coming out, by the way?
It's out. Just Google Wilbur Allen, Big Redneck Vacation. It'll take.
Well, I need to get a link of it and put it into the article.
I can send you that. I'll send that to you.
Send me that so I can give that to our audience. Big Redneck Vacation. I haven't even seen it yet. I'm so sorry, Wilbur. We're just out of time right now, and we'll definitely be in. Oh, thanks. We'll definitely be in touch, because I'm always intrigued. Every now and then you drop me a line and we go off on it. But I really appreciate your work, like I said, and all the stuff that you've been, bringing forward. I appreciate you coming on the show, and definitely keep me abreast, because anytime you need to let our audience know what you're up to next, that's what we're here for.
Let's continue the conversation.
We certainly, absolutely will. And again, everybody, UFODC.com. Again, bookmark it, because you update almost every few days, don't you? That website
every night. If I set up tonight, and I'm set up tonight, I'll be updating tomorrow morning. So it's every night.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so it's very current. And hey, all I can say, Wilbur, is stay out of trouble.
That's kind of hard to do, but I'll try.
Right. Okay. And again, we'll be talking to you soon, I'm sure. And anyone who's listening with regards to any future shows that are coming up, next Tuesday we've got the author of Disaster Government, Brian Tuohy.
Revolution Radio proudly presents live from Phoenix, Arizona, the Truth Denied Talk Radio with host Roxy Lopez. Join us here for topics you won't hear about on mainstream news, such as chemtrails, GMOs, nutrition, and conspiracy facts regarding your personal sovereignty. Humanity is 7 billion strong. We are the majority. And now, live from the Valley of the Sun, your host, Roxy Lopez.
And how you doing, everybody? It's the 24th of May, Friday. Hope you're all kicking back tonight. Thanks for joining us on the event page. I see there, I don't know, about 450 of you. And then hello, everybody in the chat room. Nice to have you this evening. Don't forget, if you've got questions for my guest this evening, you know the drill. Just go ahead and post them, and my producer will pick up those questions, and we'll try to get all of them asked for you. We generally do. And then, of course, I think in the second hour, let's open up the phone lines, and I'll give you the number then. I'll give it to you now in case you want to write it down. Anybody listening who's not in the chat room, the number is, get your pen out, 347-474-7228. and extension 821, that will ring it to my show. And we'll be happy in the second hour to take some of your phone calls. I know that when we open up the phone lines, a lot of you have a lot of questions. So I want to give the listeners who are not in chat rooms an opportunity to also ask your questions. And I just want to thank you all again for making the show as popular as it is and for spreading the word about the show. The program seems to be moving upwards, weekly, monthly in listenership. So I want to thank you very much. I want to thank Revolution Radio. And by the way, if anybody is listening and you're listening through thetruththenight.com, while you're there, you can go ahead as usual and see all of the links to my guest, my current guest tonight, who is Wilbur Allen. And anything that you need, go ahead and write us at info@thetruththenight.com. That's info@thetruththenight.com. And we're happy to forward your questions, long after the show, or anything if you want to be in touch with any of the guests, including my guest this evening. I'm looking forward to the interview that tonight. He and I have been speaking in the last month at length, some of the imagery that he has now received. And for any of you who do not know who Wilbur Allen is, he's a photographer, and he is a former White House Air Force One engineer for ABC News, and he also worked with the presidents Ronald Reagan, George Bush, Bill Clinton, currently under contract photographer for National Geographic magazine. He's got so many other stories to tell and so many other engagements as well that he has been on recently. And if any of you listened to, a couple of months ago, you heard some of that that he was up to. Without any further ado, I'd like to welcome to the show Wilbur Allen. Wilbur, thank you so much for joining us.
Frame-by-frame sample of an object that comes, I would say, from a wormhole, and you can see it materialize and manifest into the video and fly through the video. It materialized, flew through, comes back 2 hours later, and does this forward scan technology stuff, which it was scanning treetops. I saw this bright flash in my room, and I thought it was people outside taking pictures with a flash camera, but I'd never seen a flash that bright before. But as I looked into it further, whatever this object was, as it vanished, you could see clearly it's starting to dematerialize in a frame-by-frame analysis of this object as it warped out into wherever it went when it vanished. So I've never seen anything like that before, with the exception of that event at Area 51, which showed the same thing.
Right. And you did capture it. I mean, and keep in mind, people, when Wilbur was out in Area 51, you did about 60,000 photos in 2 days, right?
I did 60,000 photographs in 2 days.
So yeah, and keep in mind, if any of you who want to take a look at some of what we're talking about, go ahead and go to ufo.dc.com. That's UFODC.com. Sorry about that. I've got a bad note here to myself. Sorry about that. Yeah, I thought that was really weird. I don't remember hearing the dot. UFODC.com. Anyway, I've got to copy and paste on something else, and somehow a dot got in there. But that's not unusual. I'm having a lot of weird stuff going on with the computer these days. So UFODC.com, if you want to take a look at some of the stuff, we're going to go over a few of the photos on your website, Wilbur, later on in the show, just so that people have an understanding of what you do. Now, when you take photos, what is the delay in it? It's like something like 1/8,000th of a second or something?
Well, it depends on the time of day that I do these photographs. During the day, I find myself shooting at 1/8,000th of a second shutter speed because things happen so fast that in most cases, like what I demonstrated in the Bradshaw Ranch while we were filming out there, that an object flew by, and it flew by so fast nobody saw it. If you ran the video, you wouldn't even see it in real time. But if you looked at it in a frame-by-frame analysis, there was more activity than met the eye. But the human eye would not see that. So we're dealing with a situation here where these objects can materialize and be directly in front of us, and we won't even see it. But they're there.
You wouldn't even catch it with the naked eye. And you wouldn't, like you said, even with footage, you wouldn't catch it.
You wouldn't catch it. And it was interesting that in all of the cases, what I was able to do, the camera that I have is a very interesting camera. It shoots video at 30 frames per second, and I can choose whatever shutter speed I like. But in this case, I chose 1/8,000th of a second. So that means I have 30 frames of 1/8,000th of a second in 1 second of video. So I have 30
tonight.
Thanks for having me back, Roxy.
Oh, you're so welcome. So, when I get on the phone with you, when you and I get on the phone and start chatting about some of the stuff, and you generally send me, some of the images that you're looking at and some of the video. That last time, you really blew my mind. You always do, but the last time that you and I spoke, and you sent some of the clips. Oh my goodness. The one with, keep in mind, if you can envision this, listeners, in the middle of the desert. Wilbur's out in the middle of the desert, pitch black. He's got cameras set up on tripods, etc. And imagine this, that out of nowhere in the dark sky, this image just appears, just comes right out of dark space. And what's really bizarre about that footage, Wilbur, is that on top of it, you can see light as though the sun were rising, but right over you, not from the horizon. And this light comes over you and the camera and then goes behind you, and it lights up the trees and everything that's all around you. And, of course, it passes, but yet there's no ship. There's nothing to see. There's not a ship with lights on it shining down. It is the most bizarre UFO blip, if you will, that one of the most bizarre I've ever seen. So can we start with that one? I mean, can we start with talking about what exactly happened that night? What were you doing out there?
That was the most bizarre incident I've ever experienced in most of. Well, I'll take that back. It was equally as bizarre as the events that I experienced in Area 51, where this object communicated with me telepathically. Well, in this case, it was the same thing. I just finished climbing a mountain for the BBC, and we're working on a UFO special. And they had me lug all this gear up the side of a mountain. I've got a tripod, I've got 60 pounds worth of camera gear strapped to my back, and I'm going up the side of a mountain. So by the time I get to the mountaintop, needless to say, I was physically destroyed because I had never had that much of a workout in the sense of working myself up the side of a mountain with that much equipment just to get a shot. But we got to the top of the mountain, and I was unable to open up my camera bag because my body was physically destroyed. So we scrapped the shoot and went back down the mountain, and they took me back to the hotel where I went to bed. And I went to bed in pain. But at about 3 o'clock in the morning, I woke up and I was in no pain anymore, and something was instructing me to take my camera outside and set it up. So I went outside and set up my camera within 5 minutes of getting this message. And do you know, when I hit that start button, within 2 minutes of hitting start, this object came out of what Edgar Mitchell was talking about as a dimensional portal, which these extraterrestrials are using to come from wherever they are into our airspace. And it showed whenever this event take place. But what was interesting about it was its event did indeed take place. So we were able to prove without a doubt that stuff does indeed happen. So, but what was interesting about it is that the video showed this object come into Sedona airspace, and it came into Sedona airspace materializing into a solid object. As it left Sedona airspace as a solid object, dematerializing into immaterial state of existence, where it completely vanished. in the stream of video. So I got it coming and going. So what it indicates is it shows how these extraterrestrial devices are able to infiltrate our airspace undetected, fly through, do whatever they like, and leave undetected.
That's frightening.
Absolutely. And, Sedona has a lot of missing people, and based on what I was able to capture on film there on a nightly basis, it's without a doubt that is probably an extraterrestrial highway, because what I was able to capture on a nightly basis in Sedona were extraterrestrial anomalies.
Now, and let's just back up a little bit and keep in mind, listeners, I've already had the conversation with Wilbur. I've asked him quite a few questions in relationship to this because it really is stunning. I'm really intrigued, like I said. Now, have you ruled out the idea that it's not meteorites or meteors, right?
We ruled that out. It's without a doubt, because see what happens in this video, especially, you see it has a controlled velocity, and meteors don't have a controlled velocity. As it appeared in the first set of video, it came into Sedona airspace slowly, but in the second video, it exited with a much higher rate of velocity. So it showed coming in slow, exiting fast. So we know that meteors don't have a controlled state of velocity when they enter into the atmosphere, and generally speaking, the meteor wouldn't be represented as a linear line, which these samples are.
Right. And then what about the idea of, military exotic weaponry, military technology?
I doubt very seriously that we have technology that enables us to cloak and go in between dimensions as this object did. I doubt very seriously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
we're still in forward flight technology mode, so I doubt very seriously.
What do you think? I mean, an estimation, because you've done so much of this filming and you're used to looking at what you look at, so to speak, and footage and so forth. How fast is this object flying?
Well, as I mentioned in the first video, it came into Sedona airspace moving relatively slowly because based on the samples, I got frame after frame of this object, and it moved with a very slow, methodic velocity associated to it as it moved forward. But as it came back, it was moving frames at 20 thousandths of a second. So I looked at each one of those frames, and it would be interesting that I would find one frame that would have anomalies in it, but you wouldn't find those anomalies in any of the other frames in the video. So when you look at it, whatever these objects are, they're moving much faster than meets the eye, and they're moving at a point where even in video, I'm fortunate to capture them in the one frame, but outside of that, that's about all you're going to get, because that event takes place so fast, you're never going to see it, but it does indeed take place.
Wow. And now that you know, because you've gone over so much of your own footage and you're catching certain things. Again, anybody that's at the website at ufodc.com, you can see a little line coming through the frame of a photo. If you're on the site, there's a few pictures like that right at the get-go when you start opening the page. And that photo, if your shutter speed was any more than that, it probably wouldn't have shown up in the photo to begin with, right?
Well, if I had a faster shutter speed, what probably would have happened, I would have been able to see it in multiple frames and see it in action as it approached that point of view from the camera's perspective. But these things are moving so fast that for me to capture it in that one frame, and that's 20 thousandths of a second, and in between a 30th of a second, so it's happening so fast, it's impossible for a human to catch that. But it indicates that these types of events are taking place on a daily basis because my samples show that type of event daily.
Okay, let's go back to the one that I'm very intrigued by, which is the one where the light is suddenly shining on all the treetops, and then it passes by you, and then it's gone, and it's dark again. When you were filming that, when you were shooting that, with your physical eyes, did you also see that light coming through on the top of the trees?
Actually, I set my cameras to fire autonomously because I'm not going to sit there and wait for hours. And generally speaking, there's a saying that, and it's another word, but something happens every second. Stuff happens every second. And if that is indeed the mind, indeed the case, then what I'm able to show with that premise, that every second that there is action, and that's what I was able to program within my camera to photograph during the durations of time that I programmed the camera to photograph. Like in these cases, I was programming 3-hour intervals for each one of the sequences of video that I fired. So within those 3 hours in each one of the videos, the course of events